How to have difficult conversations. This is something that is very much playing on my mind at the moment because there are several conversations that need to be had that I am very much not looking forward to. And that's because there's a big part of me that is essentially a people pleaser. I don't like upsetting people and I don't like letting people down. And I just tried to make a video on people pleasing. And actually, I'm finding it really difficult to do much at the moment because I know that this conversation has to be had. And so my brain can't really focus on much else at the moment. So rather than make a video in hindsight or after I've had this conversation, I'd rather just show you, I guess, the feelings and the anxiety that is coming along with knowing that I have to have a difficult conversation and not knowing what the outcome could be. Because in this particular scenario, I don't know what the person I need to speak to is thinking, and there may be a version of this conversation where both parties win, like it's a win-win situation, but there may also be a situation where they are frustrated and disappointed based on previous conversations we've had where there may have been a misunderstanding about what our roles and responsibilities were. And the reason I'm not going into too much detail is because I don't know if the person I have to have this conversation with watches these videos, and I would prefer to have this conversation with them in person or on the phone rather than them find out about this on my YouTube channel, if that makes sense. But difficult conversations. There's never been a situation in my life where I have ever regretted having a difficult conversation. And the only regrets I've ever had are not having them sooner. And I can think of a good example of this. There was a friend I have for a long time, and I wasn't looking for a relationship at the time we'd met. So we'd met, we got on like a house on fire. We had a lot in common, but I was very upfront and honest with her at the very beginning about what it was I was looking for, and the fact that I wasn't looking for a relationship, but that I really enjoyed her company, and that it would be cool if we could hang out some more. And so we maintained a friendship for 2 or 3 years, and we did loads of fun stuff together. But as that time went on, I kind of knew that there were feelings developing on her side that weren't necessarily reciprocated. And I guess in my head I had this justification that I had told her in the beginning that I wasn't looking for anything. But really, that didn't really make any difference because she couldn't help her feelings just as much as I couldn't help her feelings. And so I kind of knew what was going on, and I think she knew what was going on as well. But neither of us wanted to have this conversation because it was only going to go one of two ways. We were either going to try and have this relationship, or the friendship was going to have to come to an end. And we definitely didn't want the latter, and I didn't want the former. So having this conversation was going to force an action that neither of us wanted, I guess. But anyway, of course, eventually, this is like a year after, we had to have this conversation. And this conversation was a lot more painful than it needed to be. And that was simply because these feelings that had grown, these feelings of, I guess, resentment to a certain extent, and all sorts of complicated emotions, they had festered over that year. And so it was great to have that conversation. It felt like there was this huge amount of pressure and steam building up, and it was good to just release that pressure. And also it was just really important for both of us to do that because we were both having a relationship which we didn't want. We were both having a relationship that we didn't want. And so my only regret of that whole thing was not having that conversation sooner. We don't hang out anymore. We're not friends. We don't talk. And that's fine because I feel like now she has the space and the time to find someone in our life that fills that gap that she's looking for. And I'm happy. I'm genuinely happy for that. I just wish we'd have had that conversation sooner, so she'd have had more time to do those things. So difficult conversations are exactly that. They are difficult. They are never going to be easy, but it's so important that we have them, and it's so important that we are authentic and genuine and honest about how we're feeling, even if those feelings might hurt the other person. And I remember reading somewhere that there was a great analogy, and the guy was saying that he basically went on this, I think it was a skateboard or something like that. He'd taken his friend's skateboard out, and at the back of his friend's house was this huge great hill. And so he got on this guy's skateboard and he started bombing it down this hill, and he was only wearing his swimming trunks and a vest, and he kept going faster and faster and faster. And he knew at some point that he was going to fall off that skateboard. He knew it was inevitable, it was going to happen. And this was just such a great analogy. It really made me smile when I read it. He knew that that he had to jump, and it was either hang on to that skateboard for dear life, and eventually it was going to be the worst accident it could be, or he fell off in that moment, and yes, it was going to hurt, but not half as bad as it would have done by the time he got to the bottom of that hill. And it's such a great analogy that it's having those conversations, they're going to hurt regardless, but the longer you leave it, the harder they become. And so whatever conversation it is you're planning on having, you need to know that that conversation needs to be had. There is nothing that's going to come from holding on to those things other than saving you the awkwardness and the difficultness of having that conversation. But what you exchange for that is this feeling of, I guess, anxiety and worry and panic that you know you're going to have this conversation at some point. You know it's coming. I guess it's kind of like, I remember again watching, I think it was like an episode of Family Guy. I used to love Family Guy. And if you don't know, there's two characters, Stewie, which is the baby, and the dog's name, I can't remember his name now, Brian. And Brian had done something to Stewie, and Stewie was upset about it, and he said, I will get my revenge at some point in the near future. You don't know when it's coming, but it will come. And so Brian spent about 3 seasons constantly worrying about when Stewie was going to get his revenge, and then eventually Stewie just comes out of nowhere and just slaps him around the face in like 3 seasons on. And that's exactly what it's like. You're going to have this conversation at some point anyway, so you may as well have it now and just get it out of the way while it's easier, because the longer you leave it, the harder it's going to get. So let me know what difficult conversations you need to have, or what difficult conversations have you had in the past, and are you glad you had those conversations? Are you like me, where you wish you had those conversations sooner? Because there are so many different types of conversations. You've got like conversations you might want to have with your boss. You know, you're not particularly happy at your job, and you're getting too much of a workload, and you're too stressed, and you haven't got time for your own life outside of work. Well, you need to have that conversation with your boss because it's affecting your health. Maybe you're in a relationship that isn't working anymore, and you need to have that conversation with your significant other because he or she may be feeling exactly the same way. And by you two having this open and honest conversation, you might just be able to save your relationship rather than you both collapsing in a pile at the bottom of the hill. Maybe it's a family member. Those are always very difficult conversations to have because we want to please our family for the most part, and we don't want to say things to them that are going to upset them. But from my own experience, when I've had those conversations, it's done one of two things. It's either made the bond that we have a lot stronger because they appreciate that I'm being honest with them, or I have cut ties with that person. And that's something that happened to me a couple of years ago with a particular member of my family, because I drew my boundaries. I told them what I was and wasn't prepared to accept, and they were not prepared to respect my boundaries. And so I cut ties, and I think that was the right decision to make, because we had spent years arguing and being at each other's throats, and I used to dread spending time with them because it would inevitably end in some kind of argument. So now it's a kind of win-win situation, because we're both better off, I guess, for not having spent time with each other. And maybe that will change in the future. Maybe that person will realize that I was right to draw my boundaries, and they maybe should have respected them. And if they don't, that's fine. But again, family is another one where you might want to have difficult conversations. It isn't easy. It is not easy to have these conversations, and the anxiety you're going to feel by hanging on to knowing that you have to have them at some point, for me, just isn't worth it. You're better off just ripping off the Band-Aid and have that conversation. So I would really like to know what conversations you're thinking about having, or you've been delaying. And what I'd really like to see in the comments is a commitment for you to make those conversations, to have those conversations. So either, see this as a sign that you need to make that phone call, or you need to have that conversation with the person, or schedule some time in your diary where you are going to pick up the phone or go and see that person and speak to them. So keep me posted in the comments. I'd be really interested to hear your stories on this one. Thanks again for watching. I am doing these videos daily at the moment. Sometimes they are not easy. I tried to record one earlier, and I couldn't, because I had this thought of this conversation that I need to have in my head. And for those that are saying, well, why haven't you picked up the phone? I did. I picked up the phone just before I recorded this video, and they didn't answer the phone. So I'm going to try them again later and try and have that conversation. But yeah, I struggled to make today's video because it was playing on my mind. And so, well, I thought I might as well talk about the thing that is playing on my mind rather than try and talk about something else. So thanks for watching, as always. Keep me posted in the comments of your progress, what conversations you're going to have, and look forward to hearing from you soon. Cheers.